The open world. Stepping into a land where you're free to go anywhere. You can do anything you like. Follow the story, go off-grid. There won't be any hand-holding, no set-out paths, just you and the vast unknown. Through technology being more accessible to anyone with a computer, to gamers demanding more for their money, linear-based games are a thing of the past. But how did we get here? Do we like where we are? I'm not so sure. And I think it's all about the change. First, let's journey back to where it all started. The 1980s were the stepping stones for open world gaming. Games in this time were very straightforward. You followed the predetermined path. It was a visual set of instructions that you had to follow. Let's dive in together and explore some of the games that inspired the development of the open world genre. 1981, Ultima 1. Instead of just fighting enemies in dungeons, you're free to explore an entire world. Ultima 1 wasn't just a fantasy RPG, it was one of the first games to hand players the reins and let them decide where to go. I appreciate it looks simple by today's standards, and that's of course true. However, in the early 1980s this was a giant step. Just look at these majestic orange 2D men who defy gravity with every step. 1984, Elite. Speaking of gravity, there's a severe lack of it in Elite from 1984. Not to be confused with the far newer Elite Dangerous, although if you have eyes, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. Ironically, this version of space is much more realistic than today's standards. It was very dark and confusing. Elite threw players into a vast galaxy. It wasn't just a game, it was a galaxy to explore, trade, and fight in. 1986, The Legend of Zelda. Enter Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda. It set a new standard for non-linear exploration, specifically on consoles. Hyrule was vast, and players could venture wherever they fancied. A Nintendo gem, building on a genre that would change the way developers make games. Could this be a theme we're seeing? The answer is maybe. Let's keep on our journey and find out together. These games gave a great foundation for the future of modern video games. As technology evolved, the grand design of open world gaming did too. No more will you be plunged in the darkness, no more arcade ports of video games onto home consoles. Strap in, grab your Furby and hold it tight. We're heading to the 90s.
Tickle me! Furby, the first gigapet you pet.
1996, The Elder Scrolls 2, Daggerfall. Bethesda Softworks created Daggerfall, a game with one of the largest game worlds ever made, about twice the size of my beloved Great Britain. It featured a detailed character creator, had immersive lore, and gave players the freedom of choice. Bethesda really put in the work of open world games throughout the years, and they're still attempting to do that now, just far worse than before.
You gotta be kidding me. The front...
1997, Grand Theft Auto. One of the first games I remember where I was utterly amazed. The things you could do and where it would lead. You didn't have to start a mission if you didn't want to, you could just cause mayhem. It was great. I don't think I can remember ever playing the missions of this game. I would boot up that iconic Sony startup sound, and dive right into setting people on fire and driving cars at high speed. Quite a disturbing thing for a child to play. You see, there wasn't so much pesky child protection back in those days. The original Grand Theft Auto really laid the groundwork for a solid sandbox experience. 1998, Pokemon Red and Blue. I loved Pokemon as a kid. It may not have technically been the first of its kind, but it certainly was the most successful. Shin Megami Tensei on the SNES technically was the first capture and tame game, but Pokemon had a lot more going on. It offered an open world experience, a completely non-linear based game. I judge if a game is non-linear based on how often I completed them as a child. I've never finished a Pokemon game, so I must be right in my judgment. Pokemon Red and Blue offered something new to games in general, offering two versions of nearly the same game but with some exclusive Pokemon to catch on each game. This was great for people with friends. Not for me personally. No, not because I didn't have any friends. It was more because I never knew anyone with that bloody Nintendo Game Link cable, and invisible friends can't hold Game Boys. 1998, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Jumping back into the traditional RPG, Nintendo ditched gravity-defying physics and basic scrolling dungeons by bringing Zelda into the third dimension with Ocarina of Time. Giving players an immersive world with depth, characters, and secrets, exploration felt more real than ever. This still holds up. Seriously, let's just watch this cutscene together. Tell me that's not just cinema. Getting geared up all this time to face the legendary Ganondorf, the master of music, a magic musician. Whilst this isn't technically open world, it certainly contributed a minimum to the direction the Legend of Zelda series was heading to, and it must be appreciated. The millennium is fast upon us. The 1990s did wonders for the development towards open world games. But as we're approaching the 2000s, things are starting to come to life. Games exploded with creativity and scaled up significantly. 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3. GTA 3 changed everything. Set in a fully 3D city, players had the freedom to drive, shoot, steal, or just explore Liberty City. It was gritty, chaotic, and revolutionary. Rockstar have always been a big helping hand in what a sandbox should look like. Whilst their exploits into microtransactions may have hurt the world of gaming, they certainly deserve a lot of praise for shaping the way games are played now. 2002, The Elder Scrolls 3: Morrowind. The Daggerfall creators, much like Ocarina of Time, gave fans an updated, tried and tested formula with enhanced graphics and a vastly more complex role-playing experience. They really set the standard of RPG fantasy with this title, another game that is still played today. Bethesda's open-world RPGs throughout the years became synonymous with deep lore, expansive environments, and endless possibilities. 2007, Assassin's Creed. Ubisoft gave players the chance to parkour through the streets of ancient cities in Assassin's Creed. Its historical settings became a playground of assassination missions, exploration, and incredible architecture. Although repetitive, the gameplay loop of Assassin's Creed sparked a franchise of some of their finest games. The future of Ubisoft was exciting. 2008, Grand Theft Auto 4. I appreciate this is already the third Grand Theft Auto game in the list, but when you think about it, they are one of the biggest pillars in sandbox open world games. GTA 4 offered a realistic story starring a conflicted immigrant, Nico Bellic. It was one of the first of its kind to offer true emotional depth and moral dilemmas. Powered by the groundbreaking Euphoria game engine, showing off the dark satire of American culture mixed with thrilling police chases and an engaging multiplayer experience. The list is of course endless on open world games of these times, but these are what really stood out to me as making a core impact. By the 2010s, open world games were no longer just about freedom. They were becoming storytelling giants, blending narrative depth with open-ended gameplay. 2011, The Elder Scrolls 5: Skyrim. When Skyrim hit the shelves, it wasn't just a game, it was a monumental event. Players could climb every mountain, and trust me, I know, like me, you also try to push your horse to the maximum incline. You could fight dragons and explore a rich, detailed world filled with endless adventures. For many, it set the gold standard for open world RPGs. 2015, The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. With The Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red crafted a game world that wasn't just big, it was full of deeply personal stories. Every corner of the map felt alive, with choices that truly mattered. It had an immersive world with meaningful player choices, side quests felt impactful. It really upped the stakes in giving players an open world that could still deliver high-quality, engaging stories. 2017, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild launched into the open-world stratosphere with modern physics-based gameplay. It encouraged curiosity and experimentation. Want to climb that mountain? You do you. This game redefined what open-world games really were. There were no A to B objectives. This was about getting lost in the kingdom of Hyrule and enjoying the time you spent there. Having the ability to go and take on the final boss right at the start was a cool touch. A little waste of an experience for me personally, but that's the point of this game. You do whatever you want at your pace. Spend as much time or as little time in the game as you desire. Now we join together again for the 2020s. Open world games have reached new heights, with even bigger worlds, richer stories, and more intricate systems. Technology is at a point now where creativity is the only limit to what we can see in games. Here's some of them that, in my opinion, contributed to the genre.
We came this far. We're not turning back now.
2020, Cyberpunk 2077. Though it launched through controversy, Cyberpunk 2077 promised a dense, futuristic city teeming with life. It offered a vision of open-world games moving into cyberpunk aesthetics and complex branching narratives. Through CD Projekt Red's hard work, they managed to pull their credibility back and finally gave the players what they paid for, with big updates and an alluring DLC. 2022, Elden Ring. From Software's Elden Ring took their signature dungeon, half open world, half linear game and developed it into an open world fantasy bonanza. Players really had the freedom to do anything they wanted. The only thing missing for me was a really seamless base game co-op experience. Players had to deal with invisible walls popping up as a barrier of entry to interesting caves and dungeons. It's hard to complain though, even missing co-op entirely in this game was still a pinnacle in open world gaming. 2024, Star Wars, Outlaws. Just kidding. Open world games are now a major pillar of gaming. They've grown from pixelated spacefaring adventures into living, breathing universes where you can lose yourself for hundreds of hours. As technology continues to push boundaries, the only limit to what's possible in these worlds is the creativity of developers.
There's something missing though. The scene is
Unfortunately though, due to technology advancements and the ease of creating these environments, open world games are spreading like wildfire. I find myself very lethargic with gaming at the moment. I think a big part of that is that I struggle to feel as if I'm making progress if all I'm playing is open world games. It can take you a few hours to finish anything, and half that time is through travelling alone. It's not the only thing on offer. Games like Space Marine 2 offered a linear experience that I enjoyed. The campaign was only about 6 to 8 hours long, and it was just a fun experience. It also offered multiplayer and standalone missions to extend the fun. Helldivers 2 is another example. There's no real story to the game, it's standalone missions that offer a lot of fun and replayability. It can get a little repetitive, but the developers are offering new ways to play through offering more stratagems and equipment that should keep the game fresh. It's a tough line to draw. Gamers expect more than ever before, and rightly so. We want to get the most value for our gaming experiences. If you're paying $70 for a game, you expect to receive that value in-game. The point isn't that open world games shouldn't exist, they just need to make sense. Forspoken was a relatively recent example that demonstrates my point perfectly. Forspoken was open world, but why? Was it memorable? It certainly had visual fidelity at the highest degree, but it was a bland map with pretty graphics. It was an empty world and couldn't just be successful on fidelity. Now I get it, you're saying to yourself, that game came out over a year ago and was a major flop. Yes it did, and it was. But my point is I don't think developers have learned anything from this. Case in point, Star Wars Outlaws. You have one of the greatest IPs for making a game. The world is already fleshed out and brimming with life. Yet they create a lackluster experience with a dying world.
You're not Zerg,
What is this? Where's my cash?
Use a hand here.
Ubisoft have had success over the years by expanding their worlds to become bigger and better. The formulas work for them, but clearly sales must have dropped off as they offered a more condensed experience with Assassin's Creed Mirage. I know there's a lot of people who love Assassins, Vikings, Egyptians, Romans Creed, but for me, the narrative always seems too slow-paced and every side quest just feels boring.
A samurai! One that does not hail from these lands.
I am a stranger, yes, but you have nothing to fear from me.
I don't like filler content in games. Ubisoft don't do it for me, but if they do it for you, that's okay. I don't want solo adventures to feel as if I'm playing an MMO on my own. The point of an MMO is to play with friends. Have you ever booted up New World or World of Warcraft and played solo? It's almost a depressing experience. Perhaps the way to combat this is by having a world feel more alive. Red Dead Redemption 2 did this to an astronomical scale. The amount of times you would be wandering through a town or the wilderness to come across a scripted event that felt unscripted was astonishing.
Think I'll have another drink and then go see your wife.
It's a strange concept, but you nearly don't want to feel like the main character in an open world game. You want to feel like you're part of the world, not what the world revolves around. One of the most important quotes I've seen to support this is from the brilliant level designer of Witcher 3, Miles Tost. He said that for the most part, the quest content dictated the size of the world, not the other way around. For me, this is the way open world games should be designed. It's a perfect quote for budding developers to adhere to. Quite simply, if you can't expand the world with meaningful content, keep it condensed. Skyrim, for example, without a fast travel system could have been torturous, especially without a horse. You have to ask yourself though, if you can't walk through the world and find things to distract you on the way to your objective, why have an open world? Let's have a look at a game where I feel as if a linear structure would have benefited them more. Halo Infinite. The Halo franchise has been a staple of run and gun gaming for years, making you feel like a super badass, chopping down grunts and elite alike. It's had some slip-ups in recent years due to the changing of hands from Bungie to 343. Looking for new ways to innovate your game is absolutely what developers should be doing, but not at the cost of what made them great to begin with. Halo Infinite popped players into what looked like an Unreal asset map, threw in a spice of repetitive side content like taking out enemy bases and rescuing Marines, and mixed it in with a lack of couch co-op, narrative, a recipe for disaster.
Unacceptable! Absolutely unacceptable!
Taking a look at the other side of innovation, Nintendo has always been one of the finest examples of how to reinvent a series. Let's look at what they did with Breath of the Wild. As we saw earlier, Legend of Zelda has always pushed the boundaries of what you can do in a game, but Nintendo knew that it was their time to step up and bring a full living, breathing world to explore in The Legend of Zelda. Breath of the Wild brought unparalleled freedom of exploration. Players could climb nearly any surface, explore in any direction from the very start, and solve problems in numerous creative ways. I'm not saying that they completely broke the wheel in what they did, but the main focal point is that everything they did do was perfected. It was a similar climbing system to Shadow of the Colossus, but they made it work for their game. The survival elements have been done hundreds of times in games like Minecraft, but once again, they made sure it fit their world. Through fire spreading, objects rolling downhill, and general physics-based gameplay, they made every combat scenario a puzzle. You could go in with a sword, but why not pick this up and move this here? You don't even need to get your hands dirty to win this fight. There's nothing you'd see here you haven't seen before, but they knew with the effort they put in, it would enhance the experience, not detract from what made the games feel fun originally. No one can argue that it wasn't exactly an incredibly unique narrative in Breath of the Wild. Most of the games are the same in that way, but it doesn't matter. The game never felt boring, especially on your first playthrough. Following the success of one of Nintendo's greatest hits, you could argue other games such as Elden Ring were heavily influenced by the success of Breath of the Wild. Previously, FromSoft followed a far more linear-based route, with what we'll call sequence breaks, to diverge from the predetermined path. Certainly a far more restrictive experience, more similar to a Metroidvania game, obviously without movement locking you from progression. That was Pontiff Sullivan's job. This is in stark contrast to Elden Ring's completely open-world, free-flowing adventure, but it completely worked. This was due to the fact that it never felt bland. It had the fidelity, but it also had the content. Elden Ring had 238 bosses, it had 308 weapons, and a whole host of different environments. I think through Breath of the Wild influencing big games like Elden Ring, we could definitely agree it has caused a domino effect in the world of gaming. When they're created right, open world games are incredible. There is no set way to do things. So whether you're freezing water in Breath of the Wild, riding through the Wild West in Red Dead Redemption 2, or fighting colossal bosses in Elden Ring, one thing's for sure, the open world genre is alive and well, but for how much longer? Well, if you're one of those three games, probably quite a while longer. Players want more value for their money, which we can all appreciate. Us gamers also have higher expectations for games. We often get games released with jaw-dropping graphics and stunning environments. Problem is, graphics and pretty worlds are nice to look at, but they don't make a game. A mix of, or a high standard focus on combat, content, or narrative make a game. The world of modern era open world gaming has turned into a worse paced, worse narrative, and a severe lack of content experience. The fatigue I feel playing a bland open world game is killing the genre for me. The sheer scale of some open world games can feel all too familiar. I've had enough of doing meaningless side quests or running around with nothing to do. I'm done with abandoning a game midway through and not being able to feel the satisfaction of completing it. I want more focused and less time intensive games to come. So leave the open world stuff to the people who can and have done it best. More linear games will be focused on in the future, as the average AAA developer now knows how hard it is to make a true open world experience.